let's focus, first of all, on Manchester and on Birmingham because of all the great work that you guys are doing there. Do you think that your respective cities, and let's start with you, Bennie, do you think that Birmingham's pulling its weight? Can it be as successful as London seems to be being?
Well, it depends how you define success. I mean, Birmingham traditionally is a city of about 1,000 trades, and we're trying to help turn it into a city of 1,000 startups and tech companies and digital things. And I think there is tremendous energy there. I think there's tremendous diversity, and we're working very hard with the universities there to try to help people to move. In the previous session, this was a subject, moving from education into making a living. And so we have a charity called Learning to Earning, where we encourage people to come and learn how to do things. And we have a slogan, which is, if you can't get a job, get a customer. And it seems to be working. And now we've gotten a spread of land and old and new buildings running to about 15 acres, where over the years, going about 20 years now, we have nearly 2,000 people at work in about 400 companies. And I believe that within the next decade, because it's a very long-term thing, we could have up to about 8,000 people at work in this place. Now, the question is, it's sort of chicken egg thing. You say, well, this is the place that attracts the companies. Well, I'm not sure about that. I think to some extent it's by establishing a kind of fertile base with a lot of synergy between small, energetic, creative enterprises that sort of coagulates and attracts other people. And I mean, when we opened the Custard Factory in 1991, 1992, it was an unusual thing. A lot of people are doing that sort of stuff now. But at that time, it was noticeable that a great number of the people who wanted to come in had actually been, they were prepared to move from other parts of the country to come to the Custard Factory. And I was immensely proud. I thought it's because my designs were fantastic. And I went and asked them, I said, why are you here? Why? They were hateful. Not one of them admired my purple and puce and sinuous designs. They all said the same thing. They came there to be part, in effect, they say that they came there to be part of a working community. So I think the whole thing here, at this level of developing layers to the economy, especially in urban contexts, one of the most important things, not the most important possibly, but one of the important things is to try to generate this sort of focus and gravity by creating working communities which don't deny the individuality of the various hundreds of enterprises, but where they all kind of live in the same kind of world, and as much as possible with the vertical integration, it's a phrase, isn't it, between consumption and production, because we've got shops selling things being made upstairs. So the whole thing has a kind of completeness to it. And I think that sort of thing is happening in other places, but I think it's a very cheap way of the government encouraging that kind of economic growth. And in terms of economic growth via creativity, because in these times, big growth, whereas it used to happen over generations, even centuries, and then more recently over decades, now it happens in about 5 minutes, doesn't it? Somebody thinks of an idea, and 6 years later they're a billionaire. And therefore, rather than nurturing the medium companies and trying to make them huge, I believe very strongly, actually, that the most fertile and productive ground for encouragement is to try to give as many people as possible, particularly young people, the scope to have a go, risk failure, but actually to give them an infrastructure within which they're prepared to take risks, and above all, a context in which they feel it's sort of congenial and not too threatening, like in some wind-swept out-of-town, second-hand industrial estate, the sort of daunting things which many local authorities feel is the solution to economic development. It ain't.
Tom, I'd love to hear from you what you feel defines an ideal environment, an ideal space for the kind of economic growth that we are seeing, demonstrated by the map we've just been looking at, because obviously a lot of the creative and tech growth is coming from the big city centres that you're here on the stage representing. Tom, what would your ideal environment be for a startup?
I mean, I think there is no ideal environment. I think different people like different things, but the things that we find in common is people like to interact with other creative people. And cities, since Athens onwards, have survived and thrived because of those random encounters. And so when we create buildings, we try to use great architecture, we try to use interesting buildings, we try to make space very, very flexible so people can come in on monthly licenses, however they want to do it, get in easily, get out easily. We try to create some social situations, whether that's kitchen pods for people to come in there, whether it's having a great bar, restaurant downstairs, whether it's running Christmas parties, whatever it might be. I think the other difference you've got with some perhaps smaller cities is London doesn't operate as a city. London operates as a series of different villages, and there's very little interconnection. Whereas in a city like Manchester, actually, it's small enough for everybody to know each other, be it the university, be it the councillors, be it the football club, be it the entrepreneurs. And so there's a real sense of belonging to Manchester and a real sense of interreaction of, in meetings the whole time with the guys who, I took the guys who invented graphene, for instance, to a football match with the woman who runs the art gallery, and now they're collaborating in a project they're going to do this summer. And it's those sorts of creative opportunities that are probably easier to get done in a small city. And then the other thing to say, it's not about a competition. It's not the seesaw of what's good for London and what's good for other cities. Sure. London's a great city, and the other cities want London to continue being a world capital city. Yeah. But also the country needs more than just simply one successful city, and it needs and desires lots of different cities, and it's about finding what makes them all special, what makes them all different.
Absolutely.
But can the UK economy sustain several massive regional hubs in the way you're describing, which sound very appealing, but there's other people out there who'd say, well, because of the brain drain going to the Golden Triangle of London, Oxford and Cambridge, that doesn't leave an awful lot else for everyone else. Do you think that's the case?
I don't agree with that at all, and I think the points particularly that Tom are making are well put. I think smaller cities, as they grow in size and scale, will learn to specialize in certain areas. I think one of the things that we're seeing about London, and I agree, it's a huge city, and one of the reasons why I created Tech London Advocates was to create almost a community environment within the tech sector here. But what we're starting to see here is new sectors emerging. We've talked a bit about fintech and ad tech, and now we're talking about health tech and med city. And I'm sure Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol will all create their own areas of tech specialities. Look at Aberdeen. Aberdeen's a world-leading city in oil and gas technology. You don't hear a lot about it. So I actually think there's a lot of scope and latitude for each of these cities to grow in size and scale. London, I think, is the global city, but that shouldn't be to the detriment of a Manchester or a Birmingham.
Absolutely.
We've talked about the, I suppose, the microenvironment of the regenerated spaces that you guys have been so key to creating, and how appealing they are for entrepreneurs to work in. But what else does a city need to make it a big regional successful business hub? I mean, you're Chancellor of Manchester University. Do you need to be a university city for this to work?
I think the most important thing you need is a vision. And I think Manchester's very fortunate, and it's got a great city leadership in the lead of the council, the chief executive, very, very aware where they want to be. And for me, the turning point in Manchester was not the IRA bomb that many people say. It was not even the Commonwealth Games, as often given. But it was a time when we were competing for the Olympic Games. And if you remember, when we were doing this, we were laughing stock, actually. And it was on the news with the shooting being in Moss Side and people running away with stolen tellies and all sorts of what we considered fairly crass jokes. They're probably quite funny. But the turning point was, even when we lost, there was a party of 10,000 people in Manchester celebrating, because they realised that actually Manchester was not about competing with Birmingham or Bradford or Barnsley, but competing with Los Angeles, with Sydney, with Barcelona, with the other great global cities. And actually what they had to do is be the world best at different things, or be one of the world's best at different things. Yeah. And so with the university, it merged the University of UMIST and the university, and it needs those connections, it needs that vision. Yeah,
I would like to say that happily there are probably 10,000 answers to that question of what makes a good city. You can take Plato, you can take Richard Florida, who claims that a vast concentration of gay people makes a hot city. I say that clusters of creative people all loving each other passionately and living and working together makes a good city. There are some architects who would claim that their architectural design makes a good city. And we've seen the results of all of these visions, and some work and some don't. There's Milton Keynes and there's Brasilia and all sorts of other places. Happily, there is no formula, because if there were to be, we'd be living in a plastic planet. But I think that what does happen from time to time is people unearth or come across ideas which do work. They're not the whole answer, but they're a part answer. I hope you would agree with that in terms of what you're doing. And at the moment, it seems to me, one of the important things for cities is to make sure that they take command of their potential in terms of the future of digital commerce. And that essentially is, I guess, what we're talking about.
The one other point I would add, and it comes back to your original point about can all of these cities grow and survive? And I think universities play a key role in that. You know, you've got Manchester University. You know, as you look across the country, there are great universities in places like Bristol and obviously London as well. And we've been talking a lot today about Silicon Valley. Well, what was at the core of Silicon Valley when it started 75 years ago? It was Stanford University. You know, education has been a big theme today and at many events. And we need to look at the universities, and also we can't forget our primary and secondary schools. So if these cities are making sure that their educational systems are and they've got great universities, I think that is a really strong indicator that says those cities are going to be successful in the future.
And perhaps more particularly because the age at which people become incredibly rich is getting younger and younger. And that kind of underlines the importance of education as a springboard.
Yes.
How about infrastructure? How important is it to the people who work with you at Tech London? I mean, hugely. I mean, there's been a lot of coverage this week about broadband in Tech City, and it needs to be stronger, and what are we doing to enable that to happen? Transport systems are vital. I mean, I'm personally very excited. I mean, Crossrail has been in the works for several years. When that opens, I think that's going to be another transformational step for London. We've been talking about HS2. I'm a huge proponent of HS2 because I think linking up London to Birmingham to Manchester is going to be almost that backbone that the nation will need for the next wave of growth. We should have high-speed links between London and Cambridge. It should take 20 minutes. So infrastructure, whether it's transport, airports, whatever, I think plays a vital role. But is it not more important with the kind of industries that we're seeing high growth in, that it's the connectivity?
It is the connectivity. So high-speed internet, you know, in my view, underpins all that. Open, fast internet is absolutely vital for all of these businesses, and that's going to be the transformational piece of our future.
If I could just pick up the point that Russ made about actual physical infrastructure moving people around. Several of the hotspots that we saw were outside of established urban areas. Now, we looked in quite a lot of detail at East Kent because obviously that's the first piece of the United Kingdom that has high-speed rail, and there was an intriguing question whether there might be an impact for that. And the rates of growth in Canterbury, in Margate, in Ramsgate, and the number of new businesses that are being set up there are above the pattern across the rest of the UK. And what we suspect is that high-speed travel makes it possible for cities to almost expand their benefits so that many of those entrepreneurs in East Kent are likely to be travelling into London once a week, once every 2 weeks. They're using co-working spaces so that they've got an easy place to touch down. And London is an essential part of how those new areas can thrive. So I do think that infrastructure, in the old-fashioned sense, has a vital role to play.
I mean, I was just going to say, I think you've got to be very careful. You can't just put in high-speed infrastructure somewhere and expect things to happen. And certainly in Manchester, when I came to Manchester 30 years ago, no one lived in the city. There were no facilities, no shops, nothing there at all. But actually, if you create culture and creativity, then the same people demand the better communications, the high-speed internet. And I think it starts with having reasons why people want to live in particular cities, which a lot of that is cultural, is creative. They want to see where their arts are, they want to see where their sport is, they want to see where the universities are, they want to see places that are cool and happening, and that attracts people in there.
So just to sort of round up then this session, if there was one thing that you could ask the government, let's say, to do to try and really encourage this kind of growth from the bottom up, from a city point of view, what would it be, Russ?
I'm going to come back to the earlier points made today about immigration. I mean, we can talk about infrastructure a lot, but let's not prevent the rest of the world from coming here. It's mixing British society with global society that's going to be one of the key success stories of the future.
I would say the encouragement and creation of scope for social intimacy where you're working.
Okay, cool.
I would say let go of control and don't tell us how to make ourselves creative. Just give the control back to the cities. Let them decide to do it in 101 different ways.
Yeah, cool.
And Charles, from your research, what do you think would be the one key thing that would make the most difference?
Well, I really think that individuals like Bennie and Tom, there's somebody like them in most stories of a city developing a new high-growth and thriving entrepreneurial community. And the better as a society we're able to spot those people and support them, then the better the results are for the whole of the UK.
I'd second that. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.